In celebration of 1 year of podcasting, we are holding a giveaway of epic proportions. Everything you need to get started running games. 4 dice trays, 12 complete sets of dice, 4 Crown Royal bags, the D&D Essentials Kit, the D&D Starter Kit, Horde of the Dragon Queen D&D Adventure, the Young Adventurers Collection, Nerdarchy's Out-of-the-Box Encounters, Brass and Steel Steampunk Tabletop RPG, OSR Greats, The Rat Hack, Into the Odd, and White Box Fantastic Medieval Adventure Game. But that's not all. The Curse of Strahd Revamped is included as well. This complete list goes to one lucky winner in the U.S. Here's how to enter. Head on over to Apple Podcasts or Podchaser and leave a review. Leave a comment as well. Then, go to our Facebook page and like it. Finally, stop by our webpage, thedungeonmastersdojo.com/about, and leave us a message. Once we hit 500 on each, we will draw a winner. You must do all 3 to qualify. We'll see you next time in the dojo. Support the Dungeon Masters Dojo by heading over to Apple Podcasts and Podchaser and leave a review. Take the time to leave a comment as well. This helps make us more searchable to those listeners interested in content such as ours. But more importantly, we want to know how we are doing and what topics you would like to hear about.
Another way you can support the DMD is by buying the DMD a beer, so we can continue to deliver quality content to you, our listeners. This also helps us upgrade and replace equipment. Head over to buymeacoffee.com/thedmd and buy us a beer, or 3, or 5. Don't forget to say something nice or mean. We don't care. You're buying us a beer. Now on to this week's episode. Scott, what are you doing?
I'm making a broccoli, cabbage, kale, and spinach smoothie. I'm going to consume nothing but smoothies from now on.
Nothing but smoothies. Broccoli, cabbage, kale.
The good stuff.
I'm opening all the frickin' windows.
I'm attempting to achieve an elven lifespan. It's actually quite scientific.
We're talking flatulence. We're talking playing the races of the realms. Elves, this week on the Dungeon Masters Dojo.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Dungeon Masters Dojo podcast. This is a show for game masters and players alike. We hope to bring you tips and tricks to elevate your game and develop the art of dungeon mastery. I'm your host, Louis Aponte, and these are your dungeon masters, Scott Labby and Bill Robotile. Let's enter the dojo and see what they have in store for us today. What the hell's that smell?
That's his smoothie.
Coming out.
No, you haven't even drank it yet. It already stinks. It can only get better. Stay out of the Lyceum. The pages are yellow enough.
It's packed full of nutrients.
It's packed full of something.
And what are you trying to achieve?
Elven longevity.
Room clarification.
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 How else do you live 1,000 years?
You be an elf.
Right. Or you drink broccoli, kale, spinach, and cabbage smoothies.
The ears you got at the convention aren't going to work. They will not help.
They make large elves.
Yeah, but putting pointy ears on a behemoth gentleman is not going to turn you into an elf, and neither is the smoothie. Sorry.
I'll have the last laugh when I'm 1,000 years old from drinking smoothies. Remember the Dannon yogurt commercials back in the 70s? They had all the 100-and-something-year-old Himalayan guys were eating
Dan yogurt.
goat yogurt. Yeah.
Yeah, that's funny. Yes.
Where are they now?
Still in the Himalayas. 185 years old.
Those are Yetis.
Hey, those are personal friends of mine.
Family.
Distant cousin.
So, I don't even know where to begin.
Well, we're talking
Let's
about,
talk about
elves
elves
today. Yeah, playing the races of the realms. This is for you players
Yep.
and dungeon masters. So help facilitate this. I think this is for everybody sitting at the table.
Well, as a dungeon master, you can help guide your players into not necessarily the typical and or stereotypical elf.
Yeah. So what is the typical or stereotypical elf? I would say probably the Tolkien version, right?
The Tolkien version, light, sure-footed, fair skin, light eyes, blonde hair or bright-colored hair, and, of course, pointy ears.
All right. That just described me, except for the pointy ears and sure-footed.
I believe I said slight of stature as well.
And that.
If you were three of them, yeah.
So what do they look like, right? What are some of our options, right? We get some options in the player's handbook, and of course there's a half a century worth of stuff written about elves and D&D
Be honest
lore.
with you, even newer versions, they don't deviate that much. They'll throw silver hair in there or red or something like that. Oh, we can have silver eyes or blue eyes or any color. But aside from a couple things like that, there's very little deviation.
And they don't do a lot for making them seem special or otherworldly, because I think elves are very otherworldly.
They should be.
Yeah.
I mean, and depending on what campaign setting you're using, a lot of them originated from Fae way back when. And now they're just kind of a skinny, snotty, pointy-eared human.
Yeah, and that's a shame. There's
very much.
Very, very different people, or at least they should be.
They should be. I mean, I think the last time I played an actual full-blood elf, I made her, and she was about 4'6", stocky build. When she wore a hat, everyone mistook her for a tall dwarf. Because there's variety. There's variety in every... all the humans have got a variety. Why do elves all have to be the same build?
Right. And the variety is certainly a good place to start, right? Because not every person of every species or race looks exactly the same. Of course, they have shared characteristics, and
Absolutely.
the elves are probably not much different.
My inspiration was a buxom Bavarian barmaid. That was my inspiration. She wasn't a barmaid. She was a fighter, magic user.
St. Pauli girl.
Yeah, pretty much. St. Pauli girl with pointy ears and an attitude, and I had a blast with her.
So we see what they look like in the player's handbook. We see what they look like in 50 years worth of D&D. We see what they look like in The Lord of the Rings, whether you read the book or saw the movies, and I think the movies did a beautiful job of depicting elves.
They did. At least the way Tolkien wrote it.
Right. But what about your game? What should they look like with your game? Well, I guess it depends on what type of world they come from, right?
Yeah, your campaign setting, yep.
Yep. So your elves could be peaceful.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe those are the sleight of build elves. They're not the ones that are, they don't need to carry a lot of muscle because they're not making war. They're not warriors. Maybe they're healers or whatever have you.
Artisans.
Yeah.
Playwrights.
Yeah.
They run the guilds.
Yeah, and Planet Fitness probably wouldn't be making a lot of money in whatever country those elves come from.
No.
But now you could make a warlike race of elves, in which case the ones who would perhaps pass on their genetic code more frequently would be those that were built sturdier. They would be your short, stocky ones.
Well, being that the elven race is so long-lived, and traditionally different in your world if necessary, have very few offspring because they're so long-lived. Maybe it is selective breeding.
Yeah.
Yeah, there are no, I like her, I'm going to marry her. Oh, no. It doesn't work that way. We're going to decide, and we're going to take the fittest female and the fittest male to further the race and make the race more beatific in their eyes, which would be large, powerful.
Right, and that would make sense when you really look at it, because even if you are living 5, 6, 7, or 1,200 years like the Gray Elves from second edition, and you're probably only having one child in that whole 1,000 years, you would have to really be selective. So maybe that that choice would be taken out of your hands. So maybe arranged marriages would be more prevalent amongst them
Absolutely.
than maybe other races like humans, but for different reasons. You know, in the human world, an arranged marriage might be for the purpose of carrying on wealth or marrying up, so to speak. But for a long-lived people like the elves, it could be a responsibility to your species, which more so than the accumulation of wealth.
The literal propagation of the longevity that you already have to ensure that they're more likely to live out a full lifespan.
Right. So how do you think they would see the world? Right, a long-lived species would see the world differently, I would imagine.
Yeah. Impetuous is the first word that jumps to mind for any of the races. They all make rash decisions based on emotions, and now, granted, elves will do it on emotion, but they'll think it through.
Yeah.
They'll think the ramifications, because they have to think the ramifications of everything. I mean...
especially, I would imagine, when there is, the potential for war or conflict. You know, humans kind of live in the blink of an eye, and going to war and dying isn't the same for a species that lives 60, 70, or maybe 100 years tops.
Yep. Humans are, think about it. It's bad enough that they're going to do pretty much anything to kill themselves.
Right.
With between their bad habits and their impetuous nature. And then they go to war and, all right, let's have my lifespan because of some guy in a big chair somewheres in fancy robes who's never going to pick up a weapon said I should.
So for an elf, it would probably be a very different thing. There'd be a lot of consideration. Maybe they would be accomplished diplomats, perhaps even sought after by other races, other species. If you have an elven diplomat on your payroll,
there's some true status.
Yeah.
Because not only did he serve me, but he served my father, my grandfather, and his father before him. And the country's doing amazingly well. Otherwise, he wouldn't still be employed. All because he has made sure the transition between the generations has gone smoothly.
Yeah, and a living historian, too. Someone who can go back to, for a, maybe a human kingdom, all the way back to the time when the first king conquered the land or led the rebellion or whatever have you.
Yep.
He was there, she was there from day one.
And in the short lifespan of humans, even if the king's sitting up pretty, provided they don't kill themselves with gout or get poisoned, 50 years. So if they've been sitting in that position for 600, there's 12 generations.
Yeah.
Probably more.
Probably.
Yep.
And the, they will serve the children of the king, the grandchildren of the king, and so on and so forth, or queen, or whatever have you.
Whatever the hierarchy is set at.
I see it a little different from a different vantage. I could see them elves just waiting things out too, because, like you said, the human life is a lot shorter. Why should we get involved in their problems now when we could just wait for them to pass and then work past that afterwards if they're the instigators?
Oh, yeah. It's going to be. If they're going to go to war, give them 50 years. They'll kill themselves off.
Yeah, they will. They will wipe themselves out as long as we can make sure that they don't enter into our territory. We've seen this happen countless times before, and I think of that that scene in the Lord of the Rings. I think it was the Fellowship of the Ring, where Elrond was in that battle with Sauron, and saw how all that went down, and then afterwards went on living his elven life, and seeing it come back several hundred, maybe even 1,000 years later. I'm not a Tolkien scholar; it's been a long time, but
the ring was missing for 500 years, so a good chunk of time.
So they would probably be. Well, I remember the last 3 or 4 dynasties that ruled this area, and they didn't do well. Their impetuousness was what got them conquered or whatever have you.
Or their greed to go up against a foe that they were ill-matched against.
Yep.
Lost all their lands. Now it's a different ruler altogether. And to that vein, I mean, here we're taking almost a pacifistic look at the elves, but I can see them as a staunch warrior. I mean, how good can you get if you spent 500 years practicing?
I was just going to say that same thing.
Probably better than any human warrior could.
Yeah. Oh, definitely. And if we'll go back to the scenario. I said, where they would wait. But if somebody started encroaching their territory, now they have all these elite warriors ready to defend their nation.
Because they've been out there quite literally practicing for hundreds of years.
Yeah. What would a Spartan version of an elven society look like? Pretty fearsome, I would imagine.
Yeah.
Well, let's go to the movies a little bit. You started talking about Lord of the Rings. Let's talk about Legolas. Would he have been that good if he was a human?
No.
Oh, no.
Exactly. So, with all the years of his growth, just hunting and practicing, he's able to take the 3 or 4 arrows and shoot, however many creatures at once. A human couldn't do that in that time span unless they dedicated themselves and that's all they did. But these elves, they can do that. I'm done practicing for today. I'm going to do something for the next couple of years and come back to it. And, maybe not a couple of years, but they don't have to be as dedicated because they are going to pick it up for their lifetime. Right.
Or even if they did, right? What if they decided I was going to dedicate my life to martial pursuits or sculpting or the creation of magical items or research? How...
Well, even in the Tolkien world, these are glamoring and Fohammer, and these were crafted by the our forebears in the in the Elven Kingdom. If you have something that's that amazing, that has to be someone who is dedicated hundreds of years to the craft, to the metallurgy, to the scribing, to the magic imbued in these items. So that's where you get these legendary items. There's very rarely do you hear a legendary item crafted by Joe,
right,
the blacksmith at the end of the street.
Yeah, he's usually too busy making really good horseshoes. Yeah. But when you craft an item that is named and just as memorable as the heroes that wielded it,
right?
That's something that's
and sometimes the weapon has a longer history than the person and or people that have wielded it.
Yeah, so they would perhaps...
it's made by someone who knows their shit.
Yeah, they'd probably be sought after weaponsmiths. Maybe the elven swordsmiths would be sought after by everybody.
Or even their journeymen. If you had their journeymen out in the world to learn how the other races do it, or go to show them how to do it correctly. They won't catch on to everything, but maybe they'd be a little better. But I don't see the masters going out there. I don't see the grand masters of those crafts going out anywhere. They stay home.
They would stay at home.
It's their journeymen that are out there. Go find me this metal. We don't have this metal. See if you can find a new metal. See what you can do with it. Bring it back. Show me what you've done. with the different minerals that are out there, because this is what we have, and we've done amazing things. But it's a big, wide world, and there are different materials, different metals, different ores that are everywhere. Go find something impressive. Go make something impressive. Bring it back. That's your task before you become a master.
And even a little bit, if you go a little bit further, it's not just about the metals and materials. It's now about all the new techniques you can pick up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because, I mean, you put enough humans in a room with typewriters, eventually they'll write, Shakespeare. Mm-hmm. So you can have your humans out there that stumble upon a process.
And the elves perfect it.
Because
they have the time.
Mm-hmm. Until the newest thing comes out.
Right. So they, I can almost see them viewing the world almost in the same way, watching it like someone would watch a television show, just being observers.
Human, the series.
Yeah. like the Watchers in Marvel Comics.
Yeah.
Just standing there, observing, to some extent, almost like the evolution of all the shorter-lived races.
Perhaps, maybe directing if they say, well, if they keep going on this path, that might be destructive. Maybe we should send out an emissary or two to kind of nudge them back into play.
Yeah, they may be teachers. They may be like acting as shepherds, maybe for the, those races that are in their infancy, particularly humans.
Yep.
Having had perhaps a grandfather, great-grandfather that recalled when humans were covered in hair and made stone weapons and had very limited language, records handed down orally, maybe just 4 elven generations, relatively fresh recollecting.
So, how do you think the world's going to see elves?
I think they would see them as almost depending on who they are, fairy tale creatures. The humans may have these stories that they tell their children to put them to bed at night. You don't want the elven queen to come and whisk you away. Yeah. You don't want to be out in the forest after dark because that's when the elves come out and they like to take human children. I think the dwarves may see them as dwarves tending to be conservative, may find them a little irritating. I see an elf being habitually tardy, having no sense of urgency. It's like, well, I'll get there. It's not going anywhere, and neither am I for that matter. So I'll get there when I get there. They're the ones that you're constantly waiting for to show up if you have like a dinner invitation. And that may bother the dwarves a little bit, who I imagine would be very punctual.
I can see that. As opposed to the shorter halfling / hobbit races who never seem to leave.
Right. They
but that's another episode.
I think a halfling and an elf would probably get along relatively well. I think the halflings would find elves very curious, fascinating even, and would in Baggins-like fashion often want to journey to go visit elves to see what's going on there. I think I can't see a halfling having any sort of sense of urgency either.
Right, yeah, they come to the same end by 2 different means.
Yeah, unless it's a mealtime.
Well, yeah.
In which case, if your halflings behave in any
one?
way, shape, like
all of them,
like the hobbits that they came from, they would like a good meal several times throughout the day. I don't know. I would find. I would imagine Dragonborn would find them somewhat irritating.
I could see that, but I think my take on it. The Dragonborn would probably find them a little bit more on the camaraderie side. Not necessarily because the Dragonborn are long-lived, but because they are fairly unique. And I think they would see the elves as long-lived and as knowledgeable as they are and as crafty they are as, again, being unique. But I could see the Dragonborn being more prim and proper and appreciate the fact that most of the elves as well are prim and proper in most cases.
Yeah, I would imagine an elven society would have very, not necessarily strict rules, but there would be etiquette in place.
Etiquette, and that I think that's the key word is etiquette.
Yeah, and
because when you make an enemy for a very, very long time.
Yes.
So you don't want to step on toes. So there are certain rules of engagement, whether it's conversation or gift giving or ceremonies, weddings, and the such. And following that etiquette in order to not step on anyone's toes, because you don't want to make an enemy for 600 years, would be conceived by other races as prim and proper and maybe even aloof and snobbish.
Yeah, and I think
the Dragonborn would appreciate that.
And I think the world would see them as aloof and snobbish, and I think probably the biggest reason for that would be that I think elves would. I can imagine elves feel much in the same way that you or I do. When you form a bond of friendship with someone and they pass, it's very difficult. There's a lot of emotions at play there. But if you're someone that lives hundreds of years, forming a bond of friendship with a human must be almost like having, for lack of a better term, having a pet, right?
I was going to say exactly the same thing.
We've all had dogs before, and when our dogs pass, it's heart-wrenching. Yep. And I would think they'd be very guarded of their feelings that way, knowing that they form a bond of friendship with someone that's only going to live 70 years.
He's getting kind of old and his hip is gone. We should put him down. You can always get another one. They breed like crazy.
Which, yeah, humans do. So I think I think they would be
guarded,
yeah. And those they would have a reputation from those shorter lived races as being aloof, holier than thou,
standoffish.
Yeah,
I'm better than you. It's not that I'm better than you. I just don't want to get too attached to you.
And I can see an elf forming a friendship with a human or one of these shorter lived races, and then when that person dies, them kind of continuing that bond of friendship with their offspring.
Yes, or the offspring's offspring, or whichever one seems to catch their fancy.
So there's this elven friend of the family for several generations, where great-great-grandchildren would be like, oh, this is my great-great-grandfather's adventuring buddy from 400 years ago or whatever have you.
Just call him Uncle Taraxis.
Yeah.
Hey, it's Taraxis. Hey, who's that? Oh, that's my Uncle Taraxis. He's been our uncle for 400 years.
Yeah.
He was my great-great-great-great-grandfather's uncle.
So there would be a change in dynamic that would have to be considered. These are all considerations too. Like when you're running your table, you're playing your character. What the elf is more than a pointy human.
Yeah,
right. There
should be.
Yeah, their thoughts are going to be different. Their feelings are going to, while the same, they would there would be some differences there. Culturally, they would be very, very different.
I don't know about you, but I have a sudden craving for some Toll House cookies. So
yeah.
Let me run up to the upper deck here.
And my smoothie's almost gone.
Thank God. Well, Lou's been slowly pouring it out while you weren't looking.
Should probably open the doors, too.
I'm getting them open right now.
Let's talk about this week's sponsor. Drip It is an online gaming magazine that focuses on the gamer, not just the games. Join the discussion of Dungeons & Dragons and other tabletop role-playing games, retro gaming, classic gaming, and all those great games that don't get enough attention.
Drippet calls itself an inclusive gaming roundtable. Yes, just like King Arthur's Knights of the Round Table. Regardless of who you are or what you're playing, you are equally deserving of the respect owed to all who do battle in the world of gaming.
Check them out at drippit.com. That's DRIPPIT.com. And we're back.
Where the hell did that come from?
That drink was right where it came from.
He's walking in the room and he hit his head on the gong. All right, so next question. Why would an elf adventure?
Why would an elf adventure? That's dangerous stuff, right? You could get killed or seriously injured, and it's uncomfortable. People sleep on the ground.
Yep.
I have 2 words.
What's that?
Which 2 words?
Boredom, curiosity.
Boredom and curiosity. Yeah, if you live in the same place for 200 years, you're going to want to go see stuff.
I know I get irritated on a weekend when the wife has got the same time off. So imagine living for 600 years with the same people and not leaving.
Yeah. I haven't made it past 17 yet with the same person.
You want 2 words? Marriage, family. That's enough to drive me to adventure.
That's the same thing as boredom and curiosity.
Things are deadly? Oh, okay. So's my wife. She's pissed at me. Again, has been for 125 years.
Yeah, that's
And I spent 3 years saying I'm sorry.
It doesn't do any good.
And I don't know what I pissed her off about. So
what do you imagine the divorce rate is in Elven society? Because that's if it's like till death do you part, you're making a commitment for several centuries.
I don't see elves getting married.
No, huh?
I see.
Well, let's wait. Let's wait on all that.
All right,
kinky elf love stuff that's about to happen.
I see why. Okay,
yeah,
right, I gotcha.
Let's stay on track with adventuring, but I'm intrigued by your by all that. So we definitely have to come back to that. But curiosity and boredom, right? Yeah. Why wouldn't they want to travel beyond their forest or their mountains or wherever? To see stuff, to experience different people, different species.
Well, safe and secure may not be enough.
Yeah, especially for a young elf. For the elven equivalent of us,
old, fat, lazy.
Yeah, why would you want to? I'd rather just hang out in the forest barefoot drinking.
Yeah,
like
more mead, please.
Yeah, like all middle-aged elves do, right? Drinking broccoli and kale smoothies.
Well, you can have all those yourself.
Please keep that on your side of the table.
You get nose blind after a while.
And neither you or it gets too close to the lantern, please. There's some important documents down here.
Yeah, we're right back at that thunder wave thing. That's actually not a spell. That's your spell components are a broccoli and cabbage smoothie. Yeah, I could definitely see a young elf embark on a journey for maybe 100 years or so.
Yeah, a little walkabout.
Yeah.
Well, like I said earlier, it may have been driven out by his master.
Could be.
Yeah, it's one of those. No, you need to experience the world. You need to know what you're crafting for, not just us. It's one of our exports. That's how we don't use a lot of money, but when we need it. When our emissaries go out, they need money. They need the currency of the world. And this is how we earn it, because they'll take some of our wares with us. Maybe some of the elven caravans will go out and take some of the wares. But we got to know what they want, and this is how we find out.
I can see them adventuring for the purpose of chronicling and research. Those are my 2 words, Lou. Lou gets these inspirations, right? And he's like, okay, on the break, while I'm trying to enjoy a cookie, Lou's like, you need to pick 2 words, and you have 10 seconds. I'm like, okay.
2 words about what? We're eating cookies.
Yeah, I'm like, what
buttery
yum,
and chocolate. Yum. Yeah.
and more. So I can see elves of any age, particularly maybe some of the older ones, the mature elves, going out and doing much like the Greek and the Roman historians did back in like that classical era, where they're going and they're seeing the world and they're chronicling their journey, or they're living among different people of the world to gain a better understanding of what their culture is, how they behave.
And how, as a species, the elves are going to interact with those others.
Yes, because I can imagine, and this speaks to one of the points you made earlier, that there would certainly be some etiquette behind interacting with other species.
The prime directive.
Yeah,
I'm going to say it before you do.
and there might be, some elven cultures are like, you know what, we cannot give all of our knowledge to these humans about magic because they will end up wiping themselves out and probably a couple other people. So we need to kind of pull back. Yeah, we can show them the little stuff like magic missile, but we are not going to show them how to take the veil down between worlds because they'll end up rushing in,
and
trying
you know
to conquer
damn well
the
they're going
world.
to try.
Yep,
They are going to try.
Spreading diseases as we often do.
On the flip side of that, they could also be going out there to see how much they actually know and to come up with a way to prevent them from destroying themselves, and not themselves, but the world in general.
Yeah.
Curtail their advancement.
Yeah. They may not be ready.
Well, in the world we built, that's pretty much what happened. There was science and there was magic, and the two were blended quickly. And in an effort to find greater power, blew up a continent and destroyed an entire race, with the exception of just a few individuals.
Well, if you go back to like second edition 2.5, there was some humans that actually attained 10th level and 11th level spells that actually did a lot of cataclysmic events. Yep. So why would you want them to do that? Yes, like Bill said, let's see how far they are advanced in magic or technology, and let's see if we can
misdirect them, curtail them just a little bit. Yep. I'm going to give you advice. You got a great idea. You should be doing this.
Or if they're already at that state, how do we prevent it or defend against it?
Right. So an elven death squad would not be out of the ordinary, I would think, where it's, and I think they would see this as, and they're, I see elves as inherently peaceful unless you design them in your world otherwise, and we have done that.
Yes, we have.
With one particular race of elves. But I would not necessarily see them putting together like a death squad for the purpose of conquest or for the purpose of malice, but this is what we have to do because this is in the hands of someone who is
a child, really.
Yeah, it's like a toddler with a handgun, right? There's no malice behind it, but they're going to pull the trigger eventually.
The consequences are going to be just as horrific as if someone trained with it has it.
Perhaps even worse.
Yes. That would make them, in their eyes, probably just as guilty of letting it happen if they already knew that it was
I wouldn't see them as a death squad. I'd see them as cleansers that need to go out there and excise any particular problems that could escalate and do harm to themselves and the races and the groups and the people around them.
So, they would go in, and then they would see it just like that. They would see that as performing a service for the world and every living thing in it.
A broad spectrum.
Yeah.
They definitely I definitely see them all, at least the hierarchy of the elves, having a very good view of the wide picture, of the big picture.
Yeah, and maybe they would see it the same way as we see gypsy moth caterpillars,
Yeah.
They come in, well, we're going to need to spray the shit out of this tree because it's got the gypsy moth caterpillars on it, and these things are going to kill the tree. So,
and every tree around it.
Yeah, which is the taking of a life, granted a short-lived life, but that's how they would probably see a human.
Because if that gypsy moth / human was allowed to propagate in this fashion, it's a tree today. It's the forest tomorrow. The next
Yeah.
generation would be a forest. And the one after that would be so widespread you can no longer stop it.
So they would come in and they would like maybe take out whatever spellcaster it was that was amassing these high level spells. And some of you may not know this, but spells go beyond 10th level, all the way up to 12th or 13th. I want to
12th, I believe.
12th.
Yeah, and we'll talk about those later on down the road. Not today, but pretty impressive stuff.
That's where my example came from.
Yeah.
That's why I specifically mentioned those higher level spells.
Yeah, and that would be a good reason to send these elven assassins out.
Cleansers. I don't know why
cleansers.
I don't know why you're fixating on this.
I'm using the human term.
That's it. We long-lived races. I come from the species of old and crotchety.
You can say that again.
What did I tell Carla? How old did I tell Carla I was?
622 or something
Correct.
like that.
Yeah, that's
I'm not the youngest one, and I remember that, Scott.
it's kind of great being the youngest of the old guys. Just a starry-eyed kid.
Yeah. All right, Junior, what's next?
Cultural considerations. Let's talk about elven culture. Like, right, there's what they eat, what family may look like, and what's important to them. I want to talk about what family may look like first because we were talking marriage.
We were. And I had a different view on that. And I've actually run this particular angle in a lot of my long-term games. I don't see elves getting married. I see the arranged copulation for the furthering of the race. So I can see the elders saying, no, this man and this woman are going to cohabitate, and they're going to produce a young, and they're going to raise that young. But when that young gets to the point where they are considered an adult, your obligation to the elves is complete. And if you choose to do so again, you can let the elders know, and they will see if another arrangement comes up. Marriage is usually for the stability of the family to help raise and ensure a healthy and happy environment for the young. If at year 200 you have your child and they are now considered an adult at another 100 years later and have gone off to adventure, and I'm looking at another 600-700 years of life, my duty in marriage, quote unquote, has been accomplished. And I may have affection and feelings for my partner, but my obligation is fulfilled. And that's how I ran quite a few of my elves for quite some time.
So after that, then you're like friends with benefits. You're a booty call.
Yeah,
Elves have their booty calls.
That's it.
Which is why they
pointy-eared giggity.
Yeah, why they're always happy.
That's it.
And why dwarves are always miserable. It's like all the women have beards. And we have a hard time telling them apart. I think there's only a handful.
That's exactly what you need to use to tell them apart, is a handful.
So
but that's another.
This is not a practice appropriate for today's society, folks. So
this is true.
Not go out.
We're talking fantasy worlds,
yes.
and you still have to ask permission.
So I wonder if like every 7 years, they go back to their forest.
Ponfar.
They have the Ponfar. They get all horned up and
they're elves every
and
70.
Angry. Yeah, every 70 years.
No, I bet that's just my perspective. And then way back in probably the 70s and 80s when I was running a campaign, I had one that went about 12 years, and everyone in the party was an elf. And it got to the point where I'm going to get married. We don't do marriage.
Yeah.
Well, what?
It was the 70s, man.
It was the 70s, man. We don't do marriage. Free love.
Free love back in the 70s and the 80s, before the whole HIV thing. But back then.
Before the fun, the jiggly bit started falling off.
Yeah, all you had to worry about, safe sex was making sure you didn't bang your head on the headboard while you're
That's it.
And then the HIV thing came and everybody was like, oh, okay, maybe marriage is such a bad thing now. put a damper on the
But
free
like I
look.
said, I mean, that's how for 12 years, the Elves, and probably about the end of year 1, beginning of year 2 or so about, there were some of the party members, hey, we're going to get married. What's that word mean?
Lou's making notes. He took a pen right after I got
Yep.
done talking, so that
I
means
seen
it's like,
that.
oh, there goes that whole headboard thing being taken right out of there.
I just made sure to put explicit.
Explicit. Yeah.
Well, hey, some people sleep with their feet towards the back end and their head towards you could kick the headboard.
But you're not banging your head on the headboard like Scott suggested.
Well, one of them maybe.
And this is why I marked this one as explicit.
Yeah, I thought that was a blanket rating. Yep, we're all right. So
I put the double down on some of them.
all right. So we're
Well, all right, so
this is not a House of Mouse episode.
But as I said earlier, that's how I ran it. The players really kind of glammed onto it for a little while, and then it became a moot point because they said, all right, your adventures. Number one, why would you try to marry? Number two, why would you try to have a child in the middle of an adventure? You're just really good friends. And let's leave it at that. And that took a whole lot of complication out of a lot of things. And then eventually when one of them died, because let's face it, I kill things pretty easily and wantingly because I'm evil. That wasn't that whole, oh, no, that's my wife. It's like, oh, no, that was my best friend. It made playing and in character creation a little bit easier. Not why I did it. It was just my perspective at that time.
I think it makes a lot of sense, right? Why would something that lives such a long time have the same kind of thought process behind marriage or even like that type of bond that a short-lived human would have?
Right. Well, like I said, the whole concept of marriage is to have a safe and healthy environment for the offspring. Well, if you have one offspring and that was 400 years ago, okay, now what?
Yeah. So what would family structure look like? Perhaps it would be extended. In that, if we're going to take the case of it's not so much an arranged marriage, it's an arranged copulation, and then you have your duty is to your offspring for X number of years, whatever cultural
whether
kind
they
of
reach
norm it
adulthood
is. Yeah.
or they themselves find someone to partner up with for their stint, and whatever it is in your campaign, there's going to be certain start and stop points in my particular perspective.
So family, though, may not be, well, certainly family would not look the same as it would for you or I.
No.
Family may be extended to the species or that particular area that you happen to live in.
Well, it might also extend to the parents of your particular partner. So basically your in-laws. Why? Because it is considered proper etiquette to do your part for them, because as long-lived as elves are, there are still elderly elves.
Yeah.
And someone's going to need to take care of them. Now, that might be that extended family. And, yeah, it would be 500, 600, 700, 800, maybe 1,000 years later. But there's still a certain fealty towards those people because they were gracious enough to provide you with your partner that in turn provided you with a child.
Makes sense. I would I'm a firm believer that elves should look old when they get old. I think there's like that Linda Carter phase where they look the same from the age of 20 to the age of like 75. Like pretty much like Linda Carter.
Linda Carter, yeah.
But then after that, they kind of like your middle-aged elves will look middle-aged, and your elderly elves would look elderly.
Just progression is slower.
Yeah, and I think I can imagine that they would be very, very reverent of their elderly.
Yes,
because they're living history books. They're like fountains of knowledge.
Oh, speaking of fountains, you know how it's just dipping into the fountain that Linda Carter's into? You ever seen Maria Osmond lately?
Yeah, it's amazing.
Yeah, granted, I mean, there's a little technology there, but still, she's She's dipping in the same fountain as Linda.
Yeah,
Carter
I was a
there.
big Marie Osmond fan as an adolescent.
Who wasn't?
Yes, that's true. The Donnie and Marie show.
Yeah, it was the rhinestones that did it for you.
And she still looks fantastic.
She still looks absolutely
Yes, she
fantastic.
And for that matter, so does Donnie Osmond. Donnie Osmond's like Dick Cavett. I saw him on The Masked Singer. I don't watch it.
But
you
your girl does.
You just happened to
Yes.
see this, so you didn't watch it, but you saw it.
The missus watches it,
Which means he had to.
which meant that when I was done doing all of my cool DMD stuff, I made a guest appearance on the sofa and watched the unmasking of Donnie Osmond as one of the Masked Singers. And, it looks fantastic. And he's got to be in his 60s.
Yeah,
right now.
he's probably found the Dick Cavett where like he didn't look old until a week before he passed away.
It's the spinach, cabbage, kale, and broccoli smoothies that they're all drinking.
Yes, that must be it. But you have a slight problem. Unfortunately, I looked down and the end of the plug somehow has detached itself from the cable, the cording, so you can no longer plug it into the wall. The blender. It was an accident. I don't know what happened.
Well, if I have to eat the 12 pounds of roughage right there that I would normally juice into an 8-ounce glass, then I will do that. But it's not going to be pretty.
It's not pretty now.
All right. So speaking of smoothies, what do you think elves would eat?
I see elves being predominantly vegetarian. Predominantly, I would see them as living very closely with nature. Maybe not even farming or growing their own food, but just knowing where the forest provides the food, or maybe even an elven type of farming. You know, I could see them almost like living in a permaculture food forest, you know, where it's like, okay, this is just where this plant does well. So we'll make sure that we kind of guide this plant and all the other types along with it. And this is where we'll get our broccoli or
Kale.
You know, or our carrots or our berries or whatever have you.
Kumquats. I just like saying the word.
Yeah, because it sounds vulgar. And
it's a fruit. I don't know why you would say that.
No matter
I just like the word. It's
no matter how old you get, you're still 12.
Kumquats.
And we're moving on.
So I see a lot of a lot of stuff like honey and a lot of vegetables, a lot of nuts, and I see them taking just what they need, so that they're living with the other things in the forest. A very different approach than humans is like, all right, let's cut all this shit down, and then we'll dig up all the dirt, and then we'll plant all this stuff, and when things come to eat my stuff I planted, I'll kill them and eat them too. And I'll take a whole bunch of this, and I'll have really big meals, and I'll get really fat, but that's okay because we have beer too. So I see, I see the elves with a different approach. It's like, all right, this is what we have.
I partially agree. As far as the harvesting from from nature and allowing nature to grow as nature, I'm on board with that. I'm on board with the whole let's.
That's Orlando Bloom calling, by the way, in the background, because
he
heard we're talking about elves tonight.
That's it.
Yep, he's like, I'm in.
That's a call. Lou, you need to put him on hold.
Yeah, tell Orlando we'll get to him as soon as we can.
He's kind of impetuous, so it's just
okay.
Yeah.
Why is it tonight my fax machine decides it's going to ring like an SOB when every other night we don't have a problem? I do see them not necessarily as predominantly vegetarian. I see them more balanced, but I also see their metabolism being different, where one meal a day might suffice as opposed to 3.
Right.
So instead of eating pork with my breakfast and a steak with my lunch and fowl with my dinner, they're going to have one piece of protein or fish or something a day. So they're consuming considerably less. So that one deer or that one wild boar would go much, much further in their society as opposed to a human, which would quickly consume it, quite literally 3 times faster.
And that's why you never see a fat elf. So, folks, keep your eyes open for the Elven Diet book that we'll be writing on how to achieve that coveted Orlando Bloom physique. Not the fat Legolas from The Hobbit, but not the fat middle-aged Legolas from The Hobbit, but the
slim
slender young Legolas from Lord of the Rings.
Well, that's what Pilates will do for you once you get too old.
Yes.
Yeah, there
yes.
you go. Little Pilates, and you look younger and thinner.
Yes, and I'm heading off to Pilates after this, and after I'm done with my cabbage
go
smoothie.
do some yogurt. I'd love to see that downward dog after that yogurt.
Yep.
That smoothie. I see.
You laugh now, but when I'm 400 years old,
we won't be laughing because we'll be buried.
Dead, yeah, and I'll be like, ha ha, there you go.
Hey, speak for yourself.
Well, you're 622, so.
Yeah. And?
He doesn't do kale or cabbage.
No, he's just too miserable to go. That's what.
That's all right. I had your guys' phylacteries at the campsite this week.
I hope you buried him as instructed.
So what is important to an elf?
In what way do you mean?
In any way.
Honor.
Honor. Okay, how come?
Well, I see them as for the majority of them being an honorable race or species. I don't see them going back on their word. There's no need to. So I see them more of one of the more honorable races. There's no reason for them to lie.
Are you going honorable or truthful?
Honorable.
Well, that's a much broader term.
It is, because they will have to lie from time to time to keep the truth from people.
Yeah.
And you wouldn't want to get yourself a bad reputation if you live a long time, because you own that for centuries.
And stories will propagate.
Yeah.
And if you lean to the good, 300 years later you're a hero. But if you do one little wrong, 300 years later, you were the scourge of the countryside.
And now everybody's out to eradicate you.
Yeah, he went out for a gallon of milk 200 years ago. And I had
and a scratcher.
Yeah. And I had to raise my little elf from this little nugget all the way up to an adolescent 200-year-old. And if you have ever had to deal with an adolescent elf, it's no picnic.
Well, especially when they're real young. Those terrible 20s.
Yeah.
Oh, my goodness.
And they're moody for like 75 years and storming around in the acne and everything.
Yeah,
it's just and braces.
Yeah, tweens. Somewhere between 50 and 150. Those are the tweens.
So you don't want that bad rap. Yeah, if you say you're going to do something, you're going to do it. I get that. I can see where that is, where that would come from. I would think overall the species and the needs of the species would probably be really important to an elf.
Yeah.
Propagating the species, maintaining the health and welfare of wherever it is that they live. I could see them probably living closely with other fae-like species, maybe fairy types, woodland animals. I could see them being caretakers of the forest. That being very special to them.
Stereotypical.
I'm
not saying you're wrong.
Yeah,
I'm not saying you're wrong, and I'm not saying I disagree.
It's a solid stereotype. If you have that, as humans, we tend to shit where we eat.
Yeah.
We'll pollute and we'll take too much. We're very short-sighted. and I see elves being very different. It's like, okay, this is where we live. It makes perfect sense to take care of it, because if we don't, we're going to be living a long time in a really bad place, and who wants to do that?
Yeah, the humans will go, oh, my kids will clean it up after 50 years.
Yeah, they'll pick up my mess.
But I'm going to be here for 600 years, and I have one kid, and he's been gone for 4 of it.
Yeah.
And I don't want to live like this.
Yeah, I would see them just having that kind of wisdom to know that and care about it, and that being kind of like a widespread thing amongst their people.
I get it. I see, and once again, I might sound a little stereotyped, but I see knowledge as being one of the most important things to them. Whether it's knowledge of their own race, whether it's knowledge of the other races, see, I say races because I'm old. You guys can say species and be woke. I don't care. The knowledge to make sure that their race can still thrive amongst all the other shorter-lived races, and everything they're going to do and everything they're going to learn and how they are going to reflect upon or react to the Elvens. So I see knowledge as being one of the most important thing. And it's not just, or I'm going to keep a bunch of books. It's I need to know what's going on with my neighbors and their neighbors, because even though they may be 2 countries away, that's going to affect me in time. And that's one thing I got a lot of. And I'm probably going to see it happen. So I want to know what's coming. So I see knowledge as being one of the most important things.
I agree. I think even, as broad as, okay, we have elven diplomats or even like half elven. We're going to send half elven diplomats out to the humans because they're just able to relate to them better. They don't look as different.
They may not be accepted as much, but they still are a little bit more relatable and probably can relate to the humans better, as opposed to being accepted by the humans, but they can relate to the humans and bring that information back.
And I think even, knowledge to the point of, well, I play this instrument and I am very good at this instrument, and this is just what I do. So when people want to learn this instrument, this is where they come. They send, the other elven musicians will come, or maybe even a human will come looking for me. Just like knowledge of everything, all the way down to bookbinding or sandal making.
Knowledge in general. And think of all the crafts. We mentioned earlier about some of the named swords. That doesn't come by accident. That comes from knowledge that's been accumulated for centuries, for millennia, and turned into practice. So that's why I say knowledge.
Yeah, and why wouldn't a long-lived race be looking for knowledge, right? Because accumulation of wealth, if you have everything you need or you want, I don't think they would be prone to get on that hedonic treadmill.
Yeah.
I don't think there would be wealthy elves, but I don't think there would be poor elves either. I think there would simply be elves.
There would simply be elves, yeah.
Because things like money and gold for the amassment of wealth would be seen as foolish. It's like,
well, in that vein, there really would be a ceiling to it. There really would be enough is enough.
Yeah.
Where a craft and the perfection of that craft, there's always a way to do it better. There's always one more stage or one more technique that can be perfected on and make it even better. And even if it took an elf's entire lifetime to perfect that one little piece to be passed on to their journeyman, who can then say, no, this was perfected by my master, and now I know how to do it as well. But I wonder if I can make it better. And that's the drive that of knowledge.
I think that would be what the elves would equate to wealth.
I can see that.
Would be that that degree of knowledge where, okay, I was a I was not necessarily paid 1,000 gold pieces for this item, but I was shown this technique that was perfected over the lifetime of one of my master craftsmen or whatever have you.
Yeah, that's something that, you can have all the gold you want, but here is a technique, a piece of knowledge that only I and maybe 3 other people have. But we're looking for people worthy enough to pass it on to. We're willing to pass it on. We want to, but we want someone who's willing to learn it. And once again, you're right. That I would see that as the wealth.
What class would you guys choose? If you were going to make an elf, right? What would you choose for your class?
Truck driver.
I think for me that would all depend on what age I was making them. For a younger elf, I would probably do a ranger or a druid. For somebody older, I would either go a cast, a mage. I think that's where I would do it. Again, it all depends on age.
Yeah, that makes sense. Be honest with you, I never pigeonholed myself by a class. It's what struck me, and more often, and you know me, I'm notorious for Iron Manning my stats, Iron Manning everything, and I'll roll the stats out. I'll put them as I roll them and go, all right, what does that speak to me? And what can I make? What do I want to make with this? And I've had fighters with a 9 strength. I've had casters with 11 strength or 11th intelligence and wisdom, because why not? It may be harder for them. It may have taken them longer. I can take a middle-aged elf and make them first-level caster. Well, my intelligence is 11. My wisdom is a 12. I may not necessarily. My charisma is a 10. I may not be the best caster, but I can cast.
Beats the hell out of making cookies in a tree, though, doesn't it?
Well, I don't know. Those are pretty damn cookies.
Those are pretty good cookies.
I love fudge stripe.
Those are my favorite.
Yeah, no. Lou wants something different, but too bad. You were outvoted.
I would be drawn to making an elven monk because I see like martial arts and that whole kind of aesthetic lifestyle as being something that an elf would excel at. I'm going to focus my time and my energy on building my chi, my inner strength, and learning the martial arts and calligraphy and shaving my head and walking the rice paper path.
This explains why he was drawing David Carradine with Spock ears.
Which, tell me that isn't epic, right?
It did look epic.
I'm not saying it's bad, and we will post it on the refrigerator for you for at least a month. It's refrigerator worthy.
See? It's Lone Wolf McQuaid, David Carradine. Yep, when he was in his prime.
And that is our celebrity reference of the day. No, yeah. I don't think I'm driven or to pick any specific class for an elf. I'll let my stats or if I come up with a vision of something, and I can be inspired by like a toothpick. So I'm, what sets off my imagination usually isn't really anything grand. But yeah, I don't personally see myself as he's an elf and he's got a great charisma. Oh, he has to be a bard. He's got a great dex. Oh, yeah, I'm going to make him a rogue.
Yeah, we build characters very differently. I come up with an idea for a character, and I'm like, oh, that'd be cool. And that's how I build them. You let the chips fall where they do. I do,
but I have made some epic characters by doing that.
Yeah, I think
But of course I play the shit out of them, which helps.
Less than ideal characters are always the more entertaining ones to play.
Challenging but entertaining.
Yeah, you remember that's how we did it back in the old days.
Yep.
If you had a nice DM, you were rolling 4 d6s and dropping the lowest one. If you had you were rolling 3d6 and hoping for the best.
And you roll them in order.
Yep. And that's the way it was. I mean,
well, 50 years later, when I got a little softer, I'd allow you to roll 2 or maybe 3 sets and let you pick the best. But
I haven't seen it happen.
Yeah.
Well, there was a couple times. You didn't bring good enough bribes.
What? I bring the drinks sometimes.
Back then?
Back then, no, I didn't.
No. I don't know. What else we got?
that's all I have.
That's all I have.
That's it.
All right.
We got to wrap this up and make it sound professional, and Lou can cut out all the banter at the end of it, so we sound awesome, as he always does.
He is awesome. All right, so let's wrap it up. The amount of diversity available to the player is fairly extensive when it comes to character creation, but if you're new to the hobby and a bit unsure what all this stuff means, go ahead and use the standard elf model that you're familiar with, whatever it might be. After you've dipped your toes into the creation pool a time or two, now it's time to just dive in and build. What your imagination and your vision sees in an elf could possibly be like, that's what you need to build. Use the points we've gone over. Release the unique and individual elf that lies within. Show the table just how awesome your version of an elf is. Now, roll initiative.
And that's Playing the Races of the Realms, Elves. We'll see you next week in the dojo. That's going to conclude this episode. Thanks for tuning in and listening. Please subscribe to the podcast for more great content. If you'd like to hear a particular topic, you can reach us on Facebook at the Dungeon Masters Dojo, or you can drop us an email at thedungeonmastersdojo@gmail.com. Thank you, and have a good day.